in the room, and we'll just get started here in about 4 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see who else this in here. Joseph. Okay, the 5 of us. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello. How's it going?
Okay, so now there are 5. Okay, hi, Sherry.
Were you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Hello, Patricia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Hello, Gail. Is that Gail or Jill?
It's Gil.
Okay. Yeah, because in the Philippines, it's actually Gail. Anyway. Hello, Amy. Hello, Ilana.
Hello.
We're gonna start in 2 minutes. Hi, Justin. Okay, before I introduce our speaker, please turn off your microphones and cameras. And you can always have comments and questions through the chat stream. And at the end of the session, there will be time for question and answers with the presenter.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, so Melissa, I'll just introduce you first, okay?
Great.
Okay, so Melissa has BSN and RN, and she's an active member of the ACTC nursing faculty. She teaches in both practical nursing and associate degree nursing, both traditional and bridge tracks. Melissa's specialty areas are pharmacology, medical terminology, and medical surgical nursing. She enjoys developing case studies to use in the classroom, online, and simulation labs to engage students in active learning. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you for
You're welcome.
everyone being here this afternoon. I think KOOL conference is quite cool. This is actually my second KOOL conference that I have been able to participate in. I think it's a a lot of work for the KOOL Academy folks and our system people. So big thank you for all of their work. They're in the background working like crazy to make sure this conference just comes off so well. We're going to be talking a little bit today about case studies, and it's just a brief look at the different kinds of case studies and how we can use case studies to bridge the gap from content to application. I am mostly a simulationist, which means I work with students in all different kinds of case studies, some kind of low fidelity, some mid fidelity, some high fidelity. And I am used to very interactive discussions. So I really hope that we can have more of a conversation today about how we use case studies and give each other some ideas. I'm always open to learning more things, to get, oh yeah, that was a great idea, let's do that. So if you have something in the chat, Cecilia will be monitoring that. And if you have a question or a comment, definitely put that in the chat. And sometimes I'll just ask you to come off mute if you want to. So if you do, if you probably just to help with the navigation of the classroom here on our virtual environment, just kind of raise your hand and we'll let Cecilia acknowledge you, and then you can come off mute and we can have a discussion about this. So to get started, I just want to be sure, can everyone see the screen? And it's supposed to say bringing content to life. Just do a tech check here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're
Yeah.
there. Great. Great. We're going to talk today a little bit about the difference between content-based learning, in which case we're all about, you've heard the phrase stage on the sage, and we're pouring knowledge into those eager minds of our learners. We're giving them specific knowledge. We're giving them so much facts, so much data. They got to know it. We're worried about wrong and right answers. You know, can they perform well on a test? Can they memorize this information? I know it. I'm going to give it to them. Okay. So that's more of a traditional lecture. Definitely there's a place for that. That's why we are in the business of educating. Obviously, the students need to know, and we've got some experience and skills and knowledge that we can give them. It's a very teacher-led kind of experience, and the students are asking, what do I need to know on the test? So how many of us have ever had that? Just, okay, the student, just let me know what's going on the test. Right. When we contextualize our learning, we kind of flip it on the students. We're asking them to build a framework of generalized knowledge that they can apply to new situations. Case studies really bring your content to life. So in my mind, it's a good integration of both the traditional stage on the stage and the facilitator role of an instructor to allow the students to construct their own knowledge. Okay, we're applying facts and data to new situations. Instead of looking for strict right and wrong answers, we're looking for multiple solutions. Which is the best path? Which is the way that you could solve this problem? Especially if you give them a case study that has a new problem that maybe they haven't encountered before in that course. I'm not going to give them the answer. Let's see how they find the answer. We're going to rely on the learner's knowledge base. We're in higher education, so we're dealing with adult learners, and they bring a lot of background information to the table. They have their own strengths. Maybe they're coming from a different profession, and they've got a lot to bring. They've got some lived experiences. So the context-based learning using the case studies is much more student-led. And we're asking the students, how do I use what I know? And how do I apply what I learned in lecture or my textbook or my PowerPoints? How can I use that knowledge and make it relevant? So here's the interactive part, okay? Let's share. You can add your comments in the chat, or if you would like to, we can come off mute and we'll just answer some of these questions. You can maybe pick one that is the most relevant to you. And I'd really like to see how other people are using case studies in their classrooms. And Cecilia, if there's interesting things in the chat, you can just kind of, share some.
There's a comment from Brian. He says, what do I need to know to pass the exam? That's one of the questions that they ask. And then when do I get my financial aid? Anyway, Dr. Micah says she uses case studies in every hybrid and in-person course for lectures.
Awesome. So you mentioned hybrid and then your in-person lectures. So what are your case studies about? Are they more problem-based? Are they more contextual-based? Can you describe them? You can feel free to come off chat if that's easier. I mean, come off mute, sorry.
Yeah, that works. I've been working with some case studies for quite a while, and I'm in the biology area, biological sciences. So there's a really great repository of case studies that started at the University of Buffalo and now is under the National Science Teachers Association. There's probably 700 of them now. And what I found is I can use those. So each week I pick, for every single lecture, I pick a case study that generally has to do with the content for the week, and we go through that, and I modify as needed. Sometimes I don't actually modify the materials, but I'll just modify what we answer in the questioning and then help them relate it back to the content. And the level of the classes I'm teaching is such that most of the content, if they work with it themselves, they can get that, and they need me more where they get stuck or where they need to know why they care. So it turns out that I get good questions on the content when they need to, and then this adds relevance when they leave the room. So it's been working pretty well. And I get really good, and the level of discussion in the room is much higher than when I used to just present about whatever that content was. Now I get discussions and conversations. So
yeah, oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. Someone else.
And Gwen, do you want to say something?
No, that's something we've been working on for some time now, is trying to incorporate more case studies. As the previous person just said, we aim to achieve eventually to utilize those for every class period to engage the student in the learning process. So we're still in progress, and it does make a difference, a positive difference for the students.
Okay.
And
all right,
if I can follow up with that, what subject matter do you teach?
Nursing program.
All right. Hello, nurse, fellow nurse. Okay, anyone else? Cecilia?
No, Jennifer says she doesn't use case studies, but she uses the activities that have them apply the material.
Yeah, sure. That's basically kind of what a case study is all about, just applying the material. All right. Anyone else before I move on?
So far, no one else. So you can continue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Celia. So I'll give a little bit of background about me. I'll answer some of these questions since I presented them to us. So do I currently use case studies? The answer is yes. I teach a completely online course. I teach in a hybrid OB class, and I also teach in-person pharmacology course. So I've kind of got my hands in all three of those modalities. And then of my full-time, though, where I'm mostly is in the simulation lab. My case studies are low stakes, high stakes, mid stakes, all stakes, okay? And it really depends upon what I'm after, what I want the students to get out of that particular topic. Some of my case studies are group, some are individual. And how were they evaluated? Our case studies, some of them that are evaluated have rubrics attached to them. Some have points and some are subjective. So I think the point I'm trying to get here is that case studies are so applicable to almost any content, almost any type of design that you have, how you're running your course. And we'll give a few tips on how you can even branch out further. So the question is, why use case studies in the classroom? If you've ever tried to write a case study, or if you've ever tried to start integrating them in the classroom, when I first started, it was a big stretch for me. I don't know how it was for you all's experience. It is an active learning activity that really encourages the creativity. We're asking the students or the learners to explore real-world scenarios. This is gonna make the course content much more relevant. And I don't know about your experience, but in our experience, if the students feel it's relevant and they feel that they need to know it, they actually learn it. So I have to convince them, you should care about this because, and by using a case study, we can get them involved in the scenario, and we can challenge them to solve problems. The idea is that it's a safe learning environment. So it's okay to not have the quote unquote right or wrong answer. In case studies, I'm more interested to learn how the students think rather than are they getting the right answer. Does that make sense? I am asking them to analyze. I'm asking them to look at several data points, look at trends in their data, bring it all together, synthesize into a coherent whole, and evaluate what is the most priority, what information do I really need, what information is maybe fluff. When case studies are used in classroom or in a lab or in an online environment, you're really fostering that teamwork and communication and professionalism. Because out in the world, outside of academia, when our students go to whatever job, career that they're focusing on, teamwork, communication, and professionalism is across the board. Every job needs that. Every profession needs that. So our students need that too. We can't expect them that they're going to come ready to know how to communicate with people from diverse settings, different cultures, okay, different nationalities. We're going to have to give them that opportunity. We're going to ask the students to demonstrate mastery of content while applying the knowledge to new situations. An engaging case study has a few general points that I think, again, can apply to any topic or really any kind of situation. First of all, the case study must be relevant to your course objectives. We all know our competencies, our unit objectives, our module objectives, student learning outcomes, whatever you call them. They have to be aligned. Your case study can't just kind of go off into left field. It's not fair to ask them to learn something that's really not a part of our student learning outcomes. Also, I need to think about where my students are headed in their professional life and try to bring some of those real world skills into the case study as well. Be sure that the case study is timely and researched using current industry standards. We want evidence-based practice. I like to throw in some characters, okay? I like to maybe even tell a story, maybe have some dialogue. I like the students to almost feel like they're in that scenario, if that makes any sense. That's going to increase that buy-in, and get that emotional response that's going to actually help them to retain their information. It's really fun to include a dilemma or maybe several dilemmas that have to be solved. Encourage reflective thinking, and your case study can be more generalized rather than specific. Think of an escape room where there's a lot of different clues scattered all over. You have to put all the clues together in order to move forward. Phase 2. When we're making a case study, we have to research. Again, here's some interaction, okay? Because I would love to hear some of you all's expertise, where you all teach, what courses you teach, and what kind of research would you pull in for your case study. And if you've never written a case study, well, that's fine. Let's brainstorm and find some ways that maybe you can find that research. So either in the chat or come off mute, and we'll let Celia kind of direct our path here.
I don't see anything on the chat.
Okay.
So maybe you can
So,
continue.
okay. So when you are trying to think of making your own case study, think about the objectives of your course and your final student learning outcomes. Research those topics. Be sure that the case study is realistic. You can use multiple sources if you need, or maybe just one. Maybe something that's in the textbook and then expand on that. Maybe go to the scholarly literature, see what the newest research is. If you're in an industry, research those industry standards. For instance, I'm nursing, so I research the NCSBN, which is the governing board that writes the NCLEX exam, which is our licensing exam for nurses. If I were in a different kind of profession, then I would go to that professional, maybe organization, see what kind of culture values that organization has. What's the best practices for your topic? If you need to enlist experts in the field, that is a great way to collaborate. Maybe I haven't been in that practice setting as much, so I'm going to go to a colleague or to someone that I can find in that practice setting and say, hey, what do you think about this scenario? Give me some tips. Use your own professional experiences, and then be sure that learners are prepared with appropriate classroom content prior to engaging with the case study. We have to be sure that, do you have a question?
If I may interrupt you, there's a comment from Natalie. She says she uses case studies in discussion boards. If you
that's awesome. Yeah, because I could see how that could be really open-ended, and you might get a real meaningful discussion because there's a lot of different ways that a student could approach that case study. So again, you're kind of seeing how the students think and how they solve problems more than assessing, do they know the right answer? So thank you for that comment. It's awesome. Anyone else? All right. And just like we heard from another participant, there are published case studies out there. There's in the literature, there's actually books of case studies. I'm mostly familiar with science and nursing case studies, obviously, that's where I teach, but you can apply this to anything. Phase 3, create. So if you're writing your own case study, it's really fun. If you haven't tried it, try it. See what happens. It does take a little bit of time, so maybe when you're not quite so buried over in your classwork. But first of all, immerse yourself in the middle of that scenario. Put yourself in that setting. Put the characters, give them some personality to you. Your writing is going to come to life that way. It's going to be much more engaging for the students. If I have buy-in, they will have buy-in. My first draft, I just find out where the ideas take me, okay? And then I'm going to take a step back, look at it from a different angle, revise. Think about it again, maybe do some more research, maybe take it to a colleague who has expert advice or expert experience in that topic, and then just revise again. After you've done all this planning, the next step is to engage your learners. Phase 4. So we're going to introduce the case study with enthusiasm and allow time for learner preparation. So someone else that has, someone who has already done case studies, if you would like to either put in the chat or come off mute and tell me some ways that you prepare your students to engage with the case study.
I haven't seen anything yet on the chat.
Okay.
Oh, actually, Dr. Jennifer Micah, she said, I actually read the case study
I
out
didn't quite
loud.
hear you.
She says, I actually read the case study out loud like Vanna on television.
I love that. I love that.
And
And
then
that's
they
awesome
follow
too.
along.
Yeah, that's awesome too, because now you're engaging those auditory learners as well as your visual learners. It's awesome. Anyone else?
And then Sean says, provide 2 articles with opposing views and a video of the objective event. And then Amy says, I start small. Their first case study has only 3 questions. And Ilana says she uses case studies as a discussion board topic.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it's super fun how creative we can be in case studies. And I like that one comment that said we start like easy and then we scaffold so that by the end of the course, maybe that case study is quite involved. Maybe it's an unfolding case study in which you have scenario 1, and then depending upon how they answer, it changes and we go to scenario 2, scenario 3, and it just keeps scaffolding away. And eventually the learners can work through these complicated problems, prioritize and evaluate on their own without us. We teach ourselves out of a job. In my book, that means I'm doing my work. We want to expect the highest standards of professionalism. However, we want to be kind, because if a learner is not accustomed to dealing with case studies, especially if they're working in groups, okay, and we're all online, and so if I have the students in an online like group, okay, like they're in a different room, they don't really know each other, and it's very vulnerable because they're giving each other ideas, and we need to be kind and encourage them that, okay, there's really not a wrong answer. Feel free. Think outside of the box. Phase 5, bring it all home. So now we need to evaluate the results. In my experience, I think evaluating the results of the assessment is the hardest part of it. Has that case study engaged the students? Did they learn those objectives that I really were hoping that they were learned? Was I clear enough in the directions of the case study? And I do like to encourage learners to reflect on their experience. I think that's a very powerful way to engage multiple lived experiences, and also to increase their retention. I like to gather their feedback when we are finished with a case study, and I ask what worked, and then I say what didn't work, because I'm always kind of revisiting and rewriting those, especially the case studies that I've kind of used, that I've developed myself. And then I ask them, how will you apply the new knowledge and skills in the future? So put it at your practice, learner A, and your practice, learner B. What is your takeaway? And a lot of times their takeaways are totally different, and it's just phenomenal how much they've learned. I also try to kind of address that emotional. How do you feel during the case study? So I'll give you an example of a case study that I use, and then if anybody else would like to share, you can go ahead and start putting that in the chat, and then Cecilia can kind of moderate that, because I'd love to hear some other people's ideas. So this is one of the examples of a case study that I use on my fully online course, which is AHS 115 Medical Terminology. This is an individual activity. This is a summative activity. Instead of a final exam, instead of a comprehensive final exam that's more traditional multiple choice in Blackboard, we do a final project. So it's mid-stakes in that it's worth 50 points. So it's about half of what a exam would be, okay? So there is some weight on it, but if the student really doesn't get it, it's not gonna drop their grade too much, okay? This really encourages some higher level thinking skills of evaluation and synthesis. They're going to have to think about all the things that they encountered throughout the course, and then they're going to have to bring in their own expertise, their own lived experiences that they know, and bring it all together. They're combining prior experiences and new content, and they're in a contextual situation. So this is what the students get. They have a very clear rubric here, and I've kind of condensed this, of course, for the slide. So I've given them a template. I don't think it's fair to, because basically I flipped this on them, okay? We flipped classroom. So this is kind of like a flipped case study. I'm giving them the students some parameters, and then they have to give me the case study. There's a very clear rubric though, so I give them kind of exactly what they need and how many of each domain, and then they just run with it. So is there anyone else that has a case study that they'd like to share, or a format of a case study?
I haven't seen anything yet.
I use some I haven't written, but the ones that I find the most fun and that we get really fun conversations from the biology courses, and I teach the majors and the non-majors, is the ones that are sort of like murder mysteries or something like that, where like there's a kid who decides to lose weight and buys something that he thinks is going to help that, but really it actually gets us into metabolism with the Krebs cycle. Or
Perfect.
there's another one where there's a problem with a murder mystery again, where it turns out that the poison affects mitosis. So we're doing mitosis. It's not really about the murder mystery, but it's a connection to how this drug that, this compound could kill you, but it could also be used for cancer drug, and what it disrupts that's normal. So I kind of try to use those, and they kind of like the death and destruction options. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love this discussions. Good discussion. Anyone else before we move on? But feel free to share.
Oh, Brian, would you like to talk about it? He says he uses some that discuss financial concepts for corporate finance. Basically states a series of data and interactions and wants the students to make sense of that from a CFO controller position.
Oh, that is awesome. The breadth of case studies, it can really span all kinds of topics. It's really, really exciting to hear how everybody else is teaching and our students are interacting with us. Anyone else? Okay, I'll show another example. This one was actually written during the COVID 2020 shutdown. I don't know if any of you all remember those days. I try to forget. But in the nursing program here at ACTC, we were given 2 days right after spring break to go virtual. And I don't know if you know anything about nursing, but it's not a virtual program. So we had a time of it, not to mention our students were not allowed in our hospitals, our clinical partners. So our students were not going to be able to graduate out of the program without having clinical time. That's a state board of nursing requirement. So we said, what are we going to do? So the faculty put our heads together and we came up with basically they were unfolding case studies. We called them virtual simulations. They were a group activity. The students were in groups of about 10. They each had a clinical instructor. So instead of the 10 students and their clinical instructor going to the hospital to take care of patients, we created a patient. The students were with us online in Blackboard Collab from 7:30 in the morning. Well, actually, we kind of started the actual pre-conference at 8:30, but at 7:30 they were supposed to go ahead and log in and start getting their pre-report for their patients. And these documents would open in Word. And I had them timed in Blackboard so that they would open kind of sequentially, okay? So that was the unfolding part of it. And throughout the day, we would come together in collabs, and the students were all working separately at their own homes, but then we would come together and we would discuss what just happened with your patient. Why did this happen? What are you going to do about it? And then we would have a lunch break and we would go, and we would do this 2 days a week for the second half of the second bi-term. And it was really, really fun. And the faculty learned a lot. We learned a lot about how our students interact with each other, about communication. They would have to come off mute. They would have to talk to us. Sometimes we would role play. Sometimes we'd be the doctor. Sometimes we'd be the patient. It was highly interactive. And then they had a lot of documentation that they had to do and reflection about it. It was really, really fun. Another type of case study that you can use, and this is obviously more for your hybrid course or for your in-person course, is your full-blown high-fidelity simulation lab. And a high-fidelity simulation, whether it is virtual or in-person, it's just a case study. It's a rather involved case study. You can see a picture here of some of our students. This was kind of back in 2021 when we were still using face masks and face shields. We did that because we wanted our students to be comfortable working with that kind of equipment on their face. It can be a little bit claustrophobic if you're not used to that, but since our nursing students were going to the hospital, they needed to be prepared for their real world. So to apply that to whatever topic you teach, think about what equipment, what uniforms, what expectations that your learners will involve in when they go out into the workforce. And as much as possible, have them use that same equipment, have them dress in that same way. It increases buy-in, but it also helps them to connect. What we're learning in the classroom, it really does matter. It really does matter because you all will need to use it again. So let's be real. There's some pros and cons to case studies, just like everything else. I have a few of my ideas on this screen, but if anybody else would like to either come off mute or speak in the chat, tell me some things that you like about case studies and some things that you don't like about case studies.
And Melissa, if I may interrupt you, it's almost 3:20, so you have 5
Perfect.
minutes to.
Perfect.
Okay, but I haven't seen any comment here
Okay.
yet. Okay, thank you.
So the biggest con about case studies, it's very time consuming. It can be intimidating to both the teacher and the learner because if I'm making my own case study, I'm kind of putting myself out there, okay? It is more difficult to evaluate your learner outcomes. So if you're going to use a case study for a high stakes or a summative assessment, you'll have to be really, really intentional about what you include in that case study and a rubric or some sort of to make your evaluation as objective and fair as possible. It can be really labor intensive. So you may not have very many high complexity scenarios throughout a course, but you could throw in those small case studies throughout the week and then make your high complexity. Your takeaway points, I just hope that maybe this session gave you a few ideas. I really appreciate everybody's input, and you all gave me some ideas. Any other last comments or questions that anyone would like to share?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Ruth says how to handle the student who says they don't even know how to begin. How to convince them to just try. Being wrong can be a good thing.
Exactly, exactly. That's something we encounter quite a bit with our students. I think a good way to start is to find a case study that's fairly general, not too complex, and not very controversial. And then I model it for them. So instead of just giving them the case study, whether it's paper, a virtual simulation, it's in Blackboard, that's a link, there's all different ways. Instead of doing that for the very first time, I like to walk through them, together. Maybe we'll be all together in a group. Maybe I'll have a small group and we'll work, like 5 students in a group. But uh, this is a different way of learning, okay? They're not exactly used to it if they haven't done it before. So I walk through them first, and eventually they figure out it's pretty fun, and they generally take off pretty well. Anything else? Another question or a comment?
No additional comment or question, Melissa.
All right. So this is case studies is a way of using your problem-based learning to relate your textbook to your real world skills. And that's kind of the biggest takeaway for why we're going to use case studies. And it's fun, interesting, and really engaging. So. And Cecilia, are we finished at 3:25?
Yeah, you're actually almost close.
Perfect.
Still have 2
Perfect.
minutes.
Great, great. So if anyone else has anything else to share, we have 2 minutes.
And then after that, you can entertain questions.
Yep.
Okay, so Sherry said it's very helpful. I learned to use VoiceThread as an assignment today, and I will use it for a case study. And Natalie's just thanking you.
That's a great idea. I've looked into VoiceThread as well. I thought it would be fun for our medical terminology course. So yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks for that. Someone else?
Okay, Dr. Michael says, I wonder if there is a way for KCTCS to host an internal set of case studies that any faculty could use.
Oh, what a good idea. We do have SharePoint. Surely SharePoint is big enough to create a shared case study. I'm gonna write that down. We need to ask our systems people. That would be really fun, a repository so we can share from each other. I love that.
And Gwen is thanking you for the information, and also Melissa. And then Dr. Micah says that could work well for our specific courses and also maybe lead to something more public down the road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You never know where case studies can lead. I would suggest it's kind of fun to get to elicit your response, your evaluators. So when your learners engage in a case study, especially if it was a virtual simulation or a virtual case study that you embedded in your Blackboard course, I like to add a link. I usually just create something simple like a Microsoft form, and I ask kind of open-ended questions. Some are on a Likert scale and some are maybe a short answer. And I ask the students to evaluate the case study, what works, what doesn't work. And when I have that data, it really helps me to tweak for the next time that I'm going to present that case study. And a lot of students have great ideas. So I've learned a lot about that. So I encourage you to ask your students, what did you think about it? So any other comments?
I don't see anything. And I forgot to announce before Sean Dixon left that he won the random attendance award, but I didn't see that he left right away. Anyway,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Okay, so I think, all right. So they're just thanking you.
All right. Well, thank
Most of
you
them have
all very
already left.
much.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Melissa, it's your presentation is really very good.
well, thank you. I hope that I hope that we had a good discussion, a lot of fun, and we can maybe use some practical tips on our classrooms. It's all about the students, so we're going to try to be student-centered and um, help them on their way to a professional career.
Yeah, and I haven't used case studies, but maybe I can use it in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think this PowerPoint presentation is perhaps available. Maybe Dr. Argo would
Yeah,
have
it will
that.
be
But if you,
available.
yeah, and if you
It
ever
she
have
says
any
it's
questions, mhm,
yes, she says it will be available after the conference.
great, great. Melissa.green@kctcs.edu if you have any ideas, or I think we ought to follow up on that SharePoint website or some sort of file sharing so that we could maybe kind of use these case studies and you and collaborate with each other.
Yeah, so we are actually close to the end. 2 minutes. If there is anyone else who would like to share, essentially, they're just basically thanking you, Elisa.
Okay,
I don't see anything else here.
great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
I am going to go ahead and hop off because we are actually in the middle of a case study right now done in the sim lab.
Oh,
So I'm going to run back down to the sim lab and do some debriefing with our students. So thank you all for stopping by. I hope to see you tomorrow in KOOL conference. It's been really fun.
okay. Let me see. How do I close the? Oh, okay. I saw the stop recording. Thanks,
Great.
Melissa.
Thank you